Welcome to the Palau DXpedition. We did this, we arrived essentially November 1st and we packed up on the 15th. This view is basically straight ahead between the flower and the step IR vertical that you see in the distance is North America. And it basically is taken at sunrise. I think one of our team members took it, and it's one of my favorites. Unobstructed view to North America looking straight ahead. So to give you an idea, we'll go from left to right of where Palau is for those that don't know. But in the left-hand image, you see a sort of a red circle right underneath the words that say Republic of Palau. That was our operating position in the very, very north end of the island. And if you look further south, you see a red box down at the southwest corner of the island. That is the capital city, Koror, and that is where the airport is located. Moving to the center image, you can see the inset there of in blue of we've labeled certain regions. To the far left, you see Palau down at the bottom in red. Directly south of Palau is Papua New Guinea. And you can see directly to the left of Palau is the Philippines. We were really, really pretty far west. And then the top box to the northeast is Guam, where we landed. And if you take a look at the right-hand image is Palau's in the center. The most important thing to keep in mind there is the US is at about 30 to 40 degrees to the northeast, and Europe is about 330. So they're about 90 degrees from each other, and that comes into play. Wanted to introduce the team, lots of familiar faces. There's Jack, N7JP, Brian Moran, who is unable to join us tonight, N980G, myself, Robin, and Justin, K5EM. Robin and I are proud members of the Spokane DX Association. Take it away, Robin.
Thanks, Rob. I want to say that this is a team of self-starters. The four of us here tonight all serve on the board of Western Washington, and I knew going ahead I would have absolutely no worries about any of my teammates. I couldn't have picked a better group of people for my first DXpedition, and all the skills and knowledge were certainly needed. The choice to go to Palau was selected early in the year. By the time the team coalesced, we started weekly Zoom meetings to plan. And because Palau had been discussed, the next thing was where in Palau of the 340 islands. At that time, there were COVID testing requirements on day 4 of any visitor at the hospital in Koror. So we limited our search to Koror because going to an outer island would have been disruptive to a DXpedition. Justin brought in satellite images and software measuring, and we had really fun meetings looking from above at our chosen location, trying to figure out antenna choices and coax runs. And Rob will speak a little bit more about that in a moment. So once we had our place we were staying selected and we knew the terrain, Jack suggested a hex beam, and I went ahead and bought one. So we had a couple of hex beams, but more will be said about that. We had to choose equipment, and we started inventorying, making spreadsheets of everything we were going to need in great detail, who was responsible for what. Our team finances were tracked, our joint project expenses, and pretty much everything was kept on those spreadsheets. Now, we ended up with a very ambitious set of equipment that we wanted to bring, so we needed to get it there. And the most cheap way we could find, or let me say the least expensive way, was by ocean-going vessel. I did manage to find us CTSI Global Logistics, which was a challenge being that we weren't incorporated. But Rob and I worked with them. Rob did what Rob does with people. And then I took care of a lot of the emailing back and forth. And we had that all set up to go. Basically, in our planning, we did an antenna building party. we had a network computer day. And then on August 24th, we packed 1,750 pounds of equipment in 33 bins and boxes. And Rob towed it down in a U-Haul to the LA warehouse of CTSI, and it went on the boat September 5th. So circling back to why Palau, it really is pretty low on the list, 119, but it's never before been activated on 60 meters. And it was very needed and requested on low bands. We wanted to make a full low band and high band effort. Some selected bands, you can see it was well under the 100 most wanted mark. So as was alluded to, we were very optimistic during our team planning. We were going to work as many QSOs as possible, which we did for the hand we were dealt while we were there. Our goal was to focus on bands and modes where most needed and to keep a couple of stations on the air all around the clock, which is quite a challenge for a team of 5. And of course, we were going to get enough sleep and we were going to keep it fun. We were thinking, oh, maybe we'd have a half day to go snorkeling in the jellyfish lake, or a day at the beach, or let's go see those World War II artifacts from, all those Japanese tanks that have been left behind. So that was the thought then. But foreshadowing, that was our best thoughts.
So as Robin stated, we had selected, because of the COVID testing requirements, when we landed day 1 during the planning phase, we were required to go to the local hospital and get tested for COVID, the PCR test, and also on day 5. So we wanted to stay close to the capital because that's where they wanted us tested at. We selected the Caroline Resort, as you can see in the photograph there. The bungalow to the far left on top of that hill was going to be our operating QTH. And if you look from that bungalow, pretty much due north, straight ahead, is the United States. And to the left of it, essentially 90 degrees, is Europe. So we would have had a stellar location in downtown Karor, fairly close to downtown Karor, and essentially walking distance to the hospital. So based on this, we decided to procure 2 hex beams, one pointed to North America. We'd have another one pointed to Europe. We'd have a 160 antenna, and then 2 big IRs, and then the rest of the equipment, which are K3 radios, amplifiers, and 4 Oscar 3 alpha bandpass filters. Those are high-powered, band-specific filters that basically for each band to prevent interstation interference.
So on September 21st, Rob called the Carolines to see if we could extend our stay a little, and they had lost the record of our reservation. So on September 21st, we had no place to go. That necessitated a scramble. Rob called up Al Rovner. They were going to do a DXpedition over the November holiday for the big CW contest, and they were going to stay on Babeldaub Island at the Chol Village Community Center, which also happens to be the Typhoon shelter. And these community centers there are called BIs. They are cultural centers scattered across the island for a sort of a community gatherings. So that was the new focus of where we wanted to be. Now, it turns out that Babeldaub Island, while it is the largest island, and but it only has 30% of the population, which is only 6,000 people. That was kind of an interesting fact. You can see the jungle. The military built a beautiful road all the way through the island for jungle training, U.S. military, but it is a very underdeveloped island in the Pacific, probably the most undeveloped populated island. But this site, it had a 220 main, it had toilets, it had running water, and it was going to be safe in a typhoon. So it just looked really attractive. Plus, we'd heard rumors of saltwater crocodiles, and I could see there would be no saltwater crocodiles near this island. So I called up Arlene, the owner of the M&A Beach Bungalows, a mile from this by, and she had accommodations for all of us for the entire time we were going to be there. On the upper picture, you can see this beautiful private beach we had access to, and below is your first glimpse of some fantastic drone shots and videos taken by Justin. This is the private beach, and if you look up at the top right, you just see some little dots. That's the bay, and our bungalows are down in that jungle, so very near. Yes, thank you. This is where we actually did stay at the M&A Beach bungalow. Now, it was Arlene who arranged for us with the high chief who would control the bay to rent it. And she was the key and the ticket to everything that we could get done on Babbledob, and I think nearly anybody else. Very, very big power broker on the island.
So, as Robin stated, the Caroline Resort essentially lost our reservation, and we ended up here. And one of the interesting things that Al Rovner sent to me was a video of an amateur radio expedition operating out of the bay. And at one point in the video, I noticed the guy goes down to 160 and he has S9 plus noise. And then I go looking at another video on YouTube and find out another Japanese amateur radio is complaining of noise at the bay. So at that point, I contact Gary Tango 88 Sugar, who lives in Palau. And this guy was amazing in terms of boots on the ground. He takes his little shortwave radio, goes up to the bay, and just records nothing but noise on 40, 80, and just says, yep, you guys have a problem. At that point, he suggests we get a hold of an MFJ ultrasonic noise finding device and ship it to him. He knows the lead engineer at the power company. So at this point, I personally call up DX Engineering. They're happy to send this device FedEx to Gary. He receives it within, I think, 5 days, hands it off to the power company, and they start investigating the noise, only to find out that they can't find it, but they do recognize that we have a problem. So going in, we know we have a noise problem. Gary and the power company can't find it, so we're prepared to deal with it when we get there.
So yeah, like Rob said, at this point, we're a couple weeks out from leaving, and we know we have a noise problem. And we're kind of hoping at this point we'll figure it out when we get there, or maybe they'll figure it out before we get there. But there was a lot going on Palau, and we hadn't heard back. But it was time to leave, so we headed to Palau. And you might ask, how do you get there? Because it is a long way west of here, actually a lot further west. It really hit me when we got about to Guam, and it had already been a day of travel. But it's quite a trek. So we made a little video that sort of shows how we got there. So through San Francisco to Honolulu to Guam, and then finally on to Koror. And it's quite a bit of trek. We left out at 3 o'clock in the morning from Rob's house, or 2 o'clock in the morning. Got to SFO, got through SFO for breakfast, back on another plane, headed to Honolulu, landed in Honolulu I think it was about midday, had some lunch, few hours on the ground, took off.
I feel like you're the first one welcome you to Guam with the local times from.
It was about 9 hours to get to Guam, and then we had an overnight. We went to a little park and did a Parks on the Air activation, or tried to. I think we only got 2 QSOs or 3 QSOs. And then the next later that night, we finally flew on to Koror, and made it into Koror, and then finally to Caroline. So the group from M&A met us there, got us into our rooms, and then early the next morning we got to walk out and enjoy the beach view for the first time, and start tackling our noise questions. So we got up early the next morning, and before breakfast we were up checking out the noise situation at the bay. We had a little SDR radio, a loop antenna, and a small tablet computer that we carried around. We drove up and down the road even before breakfast, and kind of were able to isolate the noise source to this area in the right-hand picture. And then after breakfast that morning, we went back up and met the power company. The Arlene from M&A called the power company and more or less demanded that they send somebody up to help us out, and they were kind enough to oblige. So these guys came up, and after about 3 hours of hunting and searching and pointing the MFJ at just about every insulator we could see. Unfortunately, we found out that the problem wasn't with the power company. It seemed like, as best as we could tell, that the problem was probably coming from the cable internet or the telephone system, but we couldn't really figure it out. We just knew we had to let the poor power guys off the hook this time. In the meantime, CTSI delivered our equipment to the buy. So they brought their truck with our 2 pallets of 2.5 pallets of gear. And all our stuff. They dropped it into the buy, and then we had to figure out what to do next. So we noticed that at the buy, the noise was much worse towards the road underneath the power lines where the cable internet also ran, and much better on the other side of the building. So we decided to set up one antenna at the buy just to see what it really looked like. And we found out pretty quick after getting this antenna up that that wasn't going to work. Very high. That's us checking out the noise on different bands, and it was bad pretty much from 80 meters out. So we sort of pivoted at this point, and we decided what could we do next to make it a little better. We decided to set up a big IR antenna down at our accommodations. The M&A is sort of in a river bottom, so it's got a couple of names called M&A Beach Bungalow and M&A Riverside Bungalow, and so we thought, since it was down in kind of the river bottom, probably had a pretty good ground, we could probably get a vertical antenna to work in the worst case. It was pretty close to the beach. So we set up down there. Unfortunately, as soon as we got that antenna set up and plugged in, we realized that location was just as noisy, if not noisier. And so that's the kind of noise that we could hear. I'll play that again. Pretty much any frequency, any band, you could hear that background noise everywhere. It was pretty much unusable.
By November 3rd, we were somewhat in a panic about where we were going to be operating, and our goals changed. The whole focus was now find a low noise QTH. When we got it, we still wanted to focus on the bands and modes that people wanted. We still wanted to keep a station or 2 on the air 24/7. But now, realistically, there was going to be no jellyfish lake. There was going to be no going off for fun anywhere. And we were determined to get on the air and make it work. We were on very little sleep from 45 hours of travel. And we realized it was just a question of grit, functioning as best we could on as little sleep as possible, and never give up. The never give up goal foreshadows that we just had to, that one just kept going and going, never give up, never give up, never give up. Without McKinley and Arlene, our proprietor, we probably were never going to get anything done. You can't get anything done on this island without them. Trying to do anything on our own would have been impossible with the culture and the way things work there. Like I said, they are the power brokers on the island. McKinley is buddies with the governor. He's got the construction company. Arlene showed us about 6 different sites. We looked at 9 total before we settled on the one we had. But I wanted to show you them because they were absolutely instrumental in helping us acquire a site and items that we needed that we did not pack for because we were going to be inside a typhoon shelter and not on a field day, extended field day. So here's a map of Bebeldalb with the sites surveyed. You can see up there, number 9 in red is where we settled. But if you look down at the bottom at number 4, that was our number 1 preferred site. It was absolutely beautiful. Rob will show you a picture and discuss that in a minute. But we were taken to cemeteries, piers, even the World War II Japanese lighthouse. But number 9 is where we settled, and it is actually one of the most important archaeological sites in Micronesia. It overlooks some stone monoliths reminiscent of Easter Island. We actually were able to rent it, and it was then closed off to the public except for being escorted through. So I will let Rob speak more about that.
So this was the preferred location. It was the Urung Pier. This location was surrounded. It was a 360 degree, surrounded by salt water and 360 degrees. There was a pier that extended between 100 to 150 feet out into the ocean. And I think our 160 antennas, our big IRs, would have just rocked. An incredible location. What was nice about this, low noise, we had power, we had a bathroom, we also had a picnic shelter. When Arlene called to see if we could essentially reserve this location for the duration of our stay, it turns out that there's a ribbon cutting ceremony smack in the middle of our expedition. And they wanted all the antennas and everything taken down for 2 days for this ribbon cutting ceremony. And we decided that wasn't going to work because it takes us several days just to install an antenna, let alone take it down and then try and put it back. So we decided to go on to our second choice. So this is our second choice, as Robin alluded to, a historic site. You've got tourists that are coming in and out, and they basically, the state government gets income being generated from this location. So Arlene suggested I speak with the governor. What was nice about this location was that, again, it was low noise, and looking between the two picnic shelters is North America. So a clear shot into North America. At the very edge of these picnic shelters is a straight drop. I shouldn't say a straight drop, but a gentle slope, 450 feet down to the ocean. Great takeoff angles for the Aggies. And then directly to the west of this image is Europe. So I had to speak with the governor to get permission to rent this location, to use this location. And he was pretty surly at first when I walked into his office. He didn't understand anything about amateur radio. And I explained to him as best I could in layman's words what amateur radio was all about. And what broke the ice was the FCC officer, if you wish, our equivalent, Jonathan, who became a good friend of mine, gave me a note saying, if you have any problems anywhere, here's my phone number, my cell number, and just have him call. And so I handed Jonathan's note to the governor, and all of a sudden he broke out in a big smile. He goes, "Do you know Jonathan and I worked together for many years?" And I didn't know that. So basically, he calls Jonathan. They have a great powwow. And at that point, we're pretty much all set. The governor then wants me to go out to the site. We negotiated essentially payment. It was $50 a day to rent the site, on the condition that one of his people would walk the tourists down to the monolith site. So they still got money generated from tourism, and we just added to the coffers. And when I handed him over cash for the entire duration, he said, "Thank you for the donation. The state could use it." So obviously, we're all both very happy.
So now we have a site finally after 2 days on Palau. It was time to start setting up our station, and the first step was to put up antennas. And our antenna choices consisted of 2 hex beams. We had 2 big IRs in our equipment stash, and then the spider beam pole for our 160. And so here's some pictures of us putting up the hex beams. Myself, there's Robin, Justin, and one person we haven't mentioned yet, and he was instrumental in helping us put up our antennas, is Mamoon. In the top picture, he's the gentleman to the far right, standing underneath the hex beam, and he was instrumental in helping us get our antennas up and helping us around the site. And he became very interested, very interactive with us. So there's going to be more. I'm sure Justin will speak to Mamoon as well. So the next slide will have some video showing us setting up our antennas. So our antenna setup consisted of, like I say, the K4 KIO antennas, and here's the first one going up. And as you can see, our site is not actually level. Some of the photos make it look deceptively level. So we kind of had to pick which antennas we wanted to put up first. And this was the first hex beam going up, was in the far corner with the elevation. So it really needed some planning to get it up onto the pole. And then it takes, for this pole, which is a 33-foot spider beam aluminum mast holding the hex beam up, it takes 3 to 4 people to get it up in the air. And the quad pod that's underneath it there is anchored down with some heavy duty screw anchors, which makes it a lot easier to put that antenna up because the base is very stable. And then Justin and Mamoon and Robin went down to put up the big IR. Mamoon was very instrumental in helping with the setup of this antenna because it has 32 ground radials. And Justin just told him how he wanted them strung out, and he went to work, and all the radials were laid out for this antenna. So you can see the hex beam on the upper left is already on the pod, and they're putting up the big IR right now, which is what we used for the lower bands. And then finally, the 160 antenna went up, and it's on a 26 meter or 85-foot spider beam fiberglass pole. And as Justin would say, putting it up is like putting up a wet spaghetti noodle. And you'll see here in the video, it's going back and forth, and it took a little bit of effort, but we finally got it up in the air. And it's essentially a vertical wire with a capacitance hat at the top with four wires coming off it that we had to string out and get set up. So one of the nice days, Justin was able to fly the drone and actually get us a aerial video of our site. And I'll speak a little bit more to this in a minute, but you can see when the video right about there is looking towards Europe. So go to the next slide. So our site ended up looking like this. You can see down the bottom right corner, we have the big IR. And that was doing an 80, 60, 40, and 30 for us. We had the two X beams, and they were operated by Armstrong rotators, which meant we had to go out and actually turn them by hand. But we could point them both towards Europe or both towards North America. And we didn't have much issues with them interacting. And then the 160 is back up to the left, up on the hill. One thing that's not noted in this picture is our DHDL receive antenna, which is off in the woods or the forest, jungle, whatever you want to call it, basically underneath where the H and hex beam is. It's down in that area there. And while it got put up, it didn't produce any better receiving than the Spider Beam 160 by itself. So we put it up, but it wasn't very useful. So our station consisted of 3 K3Ss, and in the upper picture you can see Rob and I operating, but this is what it looked like. It was kind of an L shape. And what you can't really see in this picture is the wall on the left-hand side of the picture is down. So we had a great view of the ocean while we're sitting there operating. We ran three laptops. We had 3 amplifiers. We had a Flex, a Gemini DX 1200, and a KPA 500. So we had 2 amps are running on 220, and the KPA 500 was running on 110. And we also had high bandpass filters for all the bands. And this was important for when we changed frequencies. If you wanted to operate, say, on 17 meters, you had to make sure that your station matched up with the antenna and the high bandpass filter. So everything was very well labeled. All the feed lines coming into the shack had what antenna they were. All the stations had which station it was. So you had to make sure you matched up the correct station and the correct antenna to the correct bandpass filter for the the operation to continue. So because we moved to a outlying location, there was no power. You know, Robin mentioned that at the buy, we were looking forward to air-conditioned operating area and live power with 220. But because we went out in the field, we needed power. And so we ended up renting a 6,500 watt diesel generator, which that's the peak performance of that generator, which created some wiring challenges because the generator was, you had to select either 220 or 110. And we selected 220, but we needed some 110. So we had to do some special wiring to make that work. The other issue that came up was diesel. And one of the things we found out the first day of operating, we had a 5-gallon can of diesel, and it wasn't going to be very efficient for us to fill 5-gallon cans back and forth to the gas station, which was a couple miles away. and fuel was not available on Sundays. So we ended up contacting McKinley and Arlene, asked them about getting a 55-gallon drum of diesel to be able to fuel up our generator. So the picture on the right or on the left is them delivering the diesel for us, and the one on the right is me fueling up the generator. And it was a pump that had a long straw that went down to the bottom of the barrel. And you pumped it. If you look on top of the generator, there's a special filter that fortunately Rob had purchased prior to us going. It was shipped in our equipment. That funnel filter filters out water and impurities, and it's a good thing that we had that, because this diesel was the ugliest looking diesel I've ever seen. It spilled out, and there was black chunks of stuff all over the top of the generator. So it was a good thing we had that.
Yeah. So one of the things we got the generator wired up, we got the antennas put up, and about 9:00 at night, we finally got ready to be on the air. And we had done a site survey with the SDR. We'd listened to the noise. We'd even put up a 20-meter vertical, quarter-wave vertical to survey the site, and everything sounded great. It was the quietest site we had been to. We turn on the radio. The first band we picked was 80 meters because of what time it was, and we were really excited to get on the low bands. And we were greeted with this. If you look right in the middle there, the red band shows the 80-meter band. So pretty much the entire 80-meter band, at least the entire bottom half of it, was filled with this over-the-horizon radar noise. And here it is right around 60 meters. It didn't, this night it wasn't right on 60 meters, but you could hear it pretty much everywhere. It was in the background one way or the other. So, we had been two and a half days getting everything set up with a lot of ups and downs, and to be greeted with this first thing, I think we all wanted to throw up our hands at that point. We were just like, come on, something's got to go right. But pretty quickly we tuned around the rest of the bands. We figured out that while 160 was pretty noisy, the rest of the bands were relatively quiet, and we could keep on going. So we got on the air November 4th. I think those bottom couple of pictures of the very first night. We're all hanging out under first or second night. We're hanging out under a mosquito net. The mosquitoes were not horrible. I think they were worse down in Mount Adams when I was there this summer, but they were bad enough, and there were a lot of bugs. So you'd be sitting there, typing away in the middle of the night, and stuff would be crawling all over you. There were lots of bugs, lots of different kinds. But we made it on the air, and we were ready to go.
I love this picture. I wanted it included in the presentation. It was fabulous doing overnight shifts. It was an incredible experience. It was a true field day experience, having to creep out somewhere to take care of the natural necessities. We had drinking water there. It was just too beautiful, and I enjoyed the sunsets, and the sunrises were incredible. But it was just great finally to be somewhere. I was still into the excitement of the adventure on November 4th, but I have to give kudos here to the guys on the team. They're all MacGyvers. They just did an incredible effort to get us to this point. And then after a day and a half of operating, I got symptomatic and tested positive for COVID. So my role on the team suddenly shifted to my best and highest use was to stay as far away from everybody as possible. That meant bungalow isolation for 4 days until I could kind of worm my way back with a mask outside. It meant no more meals with the team, no more nothing. It was pretty isolating in my bungalow with intermittent internet and only my phone. But if people were able to get in touch with me during this DXpedition, they did not know it, but it was because I was there in bed. And then there were only 3, and the 3 of them had to do this 24-hour shift. They did incredibly well.
Yeah. So we on November 7th, after Robin tested positive, we rearranged everything and tried to figure out, well, what's the best use of our time. I'd like to say that we all sat down together and figured it out, but we were trying to keep multiple radios going on at the same time. So it was sort of ad hoc as it went, and we just kind of figured things out. So on the November 7th, we were putting up the the 160 antenna. And Gary, who we'd mentioned earlier, was our boots on the ground before we showed up. Gary actually drove up and came out and met us. I thought he was going to take the 160 antenna with him and go home. He's a broadcast engineer on the island there. He's an American expat that's working there for another few years while his kids finish in college. And so it was cool to meet him and hear some of his stories, being a Voice of America broadcast engineer going back many decades. And he was fun to see somebody new, even as we were slogging on trying to get as many contacts as possible. So on the 7th, we put up the 160 antenna like we talked about. We were getting lots of messages, I'd say almost hourly at one point. When are y'all going to get on 160? When are you going to get on 160? When are you getting on 160? And so finally, November 7th, we put up the 160 antenna. It's quite a beast to put up. The video, I think that video was sped up about, I don't know, 50 or 100x. It took us quite a few hours out of the day that afternoon. I think at one point, Robin texted us saying, people are texting me asking why is nobody on the air? Y'all haven't been on the air for 3 hours. It's because we had to all hands on deck to get the antenna up. And so we got this up, and we were able that night to get on 160 for the first time and make some of the first contacts. I think we made, at sunset basically is when we were able to turn everything on, and we made contacts on 160 that whole night from sunset until sunrise the next morning. Rob was working FT8 into Europe, so it was really cool to start seeing the 160 contacts come in, and this antenna performed really well. I know we were somewhat loud in the US on various nights, and it was our only receive antenna. It would have been great to have a beverage as you saw the jungle really surrounded us, and we couldn't stretch out a beverage. There was no 150-foot direction that we could even stretch out a wire, and the jungle in a lot of cases was almost impenetrable. You really couldn't even hack your way through it. It was really difficult, which is part of the reason we were so limited on possible sites. One of the great things about being in the jungle, though, was Mamoon taught us how to drink fresh coconuts. He showed us how to pick the right ones off the tree and knock them down, and then ultimately have a nice refreshing treat. We didn't have a cooler or anything up there. I think by day 6 or 7, we started bringing a bucket of ice up from the accommodations, but it was great to have fresh coconuts as much as we possibly could. And so things were really starting to go well. By November 9th, I showed up first thing in the morning and started to, I relieved Rob. It was, I think, right at sunrise. Rob headed back down, and I noticed there was a little bit of extra clouds on the horizon. And those little bit extra clouds turned into a lot of extra clouds. And so we'll show you a little video of what we ultimately have been calling the Typhoon. I think it did end up being I think what's equivalent to a tropical depression here in the U.S. As it moved west into the Philippines, but it started basically right over us, and it caused a lot of havoc that you'll see next. So the first part of this video shows a previous storm, so an earlier storm, I think on the day 1 of operation, and then we got a little bit of a comparison to what hit us. A little breezy. This is a normal rainstorm. We got a lot of these as we were there. It didn't really affect us much. Just kind of powered through them. Well, we lost the walls, but we're holding on to the radios. Well, we just had a massive squall take out the walls. So we got everything covered as best as we can, and we just got to wait it out. The antennas are still up at the moment, but that's pretty serious. Storm's slowing down a little bit. Hopefully it keeps slowing down. It's really bad. We haven't lost any of the antennas yet, but the 160 is barely hanging on. We just cinched up everything on the guys. The beams were leaning over quite a bit, and we lost all our walls. Trying to pack up the stations to keep them as dry as possible. wind slowing down, rain slowing down a little bit. We'll be back. So at this point, we packed up everything, as you can see, that was electronic into bins as best as we could, and we headed back down to M&A to try to dry things out.
Yeah, I just realized that. As Justin just said, we got very soaked. You could tell on the video he took that he and I were both just completely drenched, and even covering everything with a tarp and trying to do the best we could to keep water out of everything. We needed to bring it back to the resort. And fortunately, we were the only guests at the resort, so they allowed us to take over the dining room, which is the picture on the left. That's a common dining room for everybody staying at the resort. And we laid all the equipment out. I took the tops off of all the K3s, inspected them, looking for moisture. You can see the Gemini and the Flex amp down there on the far end of the table. And then as things dried out, because we were in such a rush to break everything down, to make it easier on ourselves, when we finally were able to return, we broke everything out into our stations and set the equipment on tables and repacked everything as complete stations. But one of the things that affected our drying efforts was the rain created a lot of humidity, and with the wind going on, we had a lot of power outages at the resort. So the fans weren't running, or the air conditioning in the building wasn't operating. So we had a lot of humidity in there. So it took a little longer to dry things out.
Check everything for the most part still vertical. Winds have died out. You can actually see the reef again. Chickens and birds are here. 160 is still up. Still has all its pieces. That's good. Get it straightened out. Beams are still up. The vertical stepper's still up. Mahmoud's got the tarps back up, it looks like. So getting better. He's been working hard since we've been gone. All right, man, good work.
So this is what's left of our shack after the storm rolled through, and we hadn't picked up the band pass filters yet. Those are underneath the tarp there. We did take them back to the resort to dry them out. And here Rob and I are returning the equipment back to the next day to reset the stations. So don't start the video yet. So one of the things that happened while we were off the air the night the storm hit us is Justin, I think it was Justin, received a phone call that said that there was a problem with the generator we had rented, and that they were going to be sending a mechanic out the next morning to look at it. So here's a quick video of what we're calling the mechanic. And this is our generator. You can see it right there in the start of the video here. I'm going to let the video play, and then I'll discuss it a little bit more afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a slight content warning. This video is a little louder than some of the previous ones. So if they were loud for you, you might put your finger on your speaker button real quick. I'll give everybody a few seconds to do that. This has loud rod running engines, as you'll see in a second.
So I'd like to remind everybody that this is a diesel generator. And while diesels do smoke, they don't smoke quite like this. And I think the RPMs on this generator were faster than my weed eater that I use around the house here. So the other thing I'd like to point out is when the first time he fired it up at this RPM, Rob and I were both in the same shelter where he's fixing the generator. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I think Rob was pretty much the same thing here. So yeah, that's our story with the mechanic. So because that generator, the mechanic couldn't fix, and I would also like to point out that when Justin and I left the day before, the generator was running just fine. We just did an emergency shutdown because of the storm coming through. But because that generator was no longer useful or was going to be able to be used for us. We had to change plans. And one of the things, McKinley's construction company, which rented us the generator, he had one more that was a 3,000 watt. Unfortunately, it was only a 120. One of the things we had shipped to Palau prior to losing our accommodations at Carolyn's was a 220 generator that Rob had purchased, but it was only a 3,000 watt, so it wasn't going to be able to operate the entire station. But we were able to bring it out and operate our flex amp that we had on site, but it wasn't going to be able to operate two amplifiers, let alone three. So fortunately for us, the Gemini DX 1200 is configurable for either 220 or 110. And so we were able to rewire or reconfigure the Gemini to operate off of 110, which is the picture on the left. You see all the screws there. There are 42 screws, I believe, in the chassis to change the fuse out in the Gemini to allow it to run on 110. But it created more issues in the shack. So we had one generator supplying 110, another generator supplying 220. We had to make sure we had everything labeled correctly and separated out correctly. And in the end, it worked. Unfortunately, the generator we brought with us, even though it was able to do 220, we couldn't operate the flex on FT8 with a lot of power. It wouldn't take it. So we had to reduce the amount of power coming off the flex, even though we were able to operate it. So we made it work, but it was not optimal. But it was one of those things we had to overcome again, and we had a lot of wiring going on. So we had things wired up for the 6,500 watt generator that we had to reconfigure for the new generator coming in, plus this generator, and get all the power configured correctly.
Yeah, so we got back on the air. Like we said, we were off for 31 hours. The antenna, the 160 antenna, was down after the typhoon. So it took us another, I think, a day or so before we were able to fix that. But we made it back on the air and started getting going. We got 60 activated. So this is Happy Rob making the first 60 meter contacts from Palau ever. So that was a lot of fun to do. And then after that, the weather started cooperating a little more, at least for the next few days. So we got back on the air. November 10th was our first day without any emergencies. So prior to that, Jack and I just about every day had been spending a lot of time doing something. So we were doing our best to keep a station or two on the air. The one thing we didn't mention so far is that we mentioned Brian had a family emergency and he wasn't able to come. The one major way he was able to support us was during the night shift. He would help Rob out. Because Rob ended up running a lot of the night shifts. He would help Rob out by running FT8 remotely via AnyDesk, and he would log into one or even two of the machines over a Wi-Fi LTE hotspot and run one of those stations. So it was actually helpful. It was his afternoon during our night, so he was able to help out and run some extra contacts, and it really kept the rate up. The other thing we had going on was with these laptops, we could slide them around and point them different directions. So there was one point where every one of us was running multi-2, multi-3 even. At one point I had two laptops running FT8 and I was just clicking to fill the queues, and then I was running SSB pile up. So I was doing like it was my best rate ever of my life. I think I was doing 450 an hour, running 3 radios simultaneously. So there's a lot of questions. People say, why are you on FT8 so much? And the nice thing about it was we could keep it going in the background while we only had one op there doing CW or SSB. So that was really helpful. At this point, we certainly felt like we were racing the clock. We knew that our time on the island was running short quickly, and so we were just cranking out queues as much as we could. Robin came back up, operated in a mask, and tried to stay as far away from us as we could. We had constant breeze running through, and we'd put her downwind and make sure we stayed as safe as possible. And fortunately, none of the rest of us came down with COVID.
And then it was time to pack. This was the 14th of November. We were going to have our equipment picked up on the 15th, and there was a lot to do. 33 bins and boxes, and as you saw, what a chaos we had in the storm. So getting back organized again was a monumental task. And the equipment had to roughly go into the same labeled bins as they came out of, because we had inventory sheets for customs and immigration. So it was a big job. I worked on that while the men were taking down antennas. And it was pretty much starting from noon on the 14th into dusk. And then the next morning we got up very, very early to finish. And it was a good thing we had done what we did, because the rain started. And it was just another huge gusher. As a matter of fact, we were glad we really had the antennas down when we did. And we left the resort about 4 o'clock in the afternoon to go visit Jonathan, who Rob talked about earlier. And our flight wasn't till 3:25 in the morning. But by this time, we had been up since about 5 a.m. to get to the site to finish packing. So we had a lot of time to kill. We managed to find the communications site, the World War II communications site where Tokyo Rose broadcasts from. It was an old bombed out site that the Japanese had a strong presence there. We saw the old radio towers on the ground and took a lot of pictures of that, not included here. Then we met Gary for dinner at a lovely restaurant, but we had a lot of time to kill. So for the very first time, we were able all together to tour around over the bridge to Karor and go up to the Carolines. And when we got there, we realized that it would have been a disaster had we ended up there. So every step of the way, you can see through every misfortune, there was always a gift, something always coming to the rescue to help us get through every adversity. And we ended up waiting at the airport till 12:25 a.m. for it to open for our 3:25 a.m. flight. And it was about another 24 hours to get home and about 45 hours since we'd been in bed.
So these are the numbers that we managed to make. Note, the most important thing that's not listed on this page is we actually made over 30,000 contacts with dupes included. The total contacts are with the dupes removed. What should be noted, I think the most important thing to me in looking at the statistics is that we did almost 30,000 queues in 6.5 days. It averages out to about 4,500 queues a day. And remember, at the most we had operating was 4 of us, and then with Brian helping. And then when Robin came down with COVID, we were down to 3. And so, averaging 4.5K QSOs a day was pretty monumental. And the breakdown here, obviously, you guys can read it all. It was 25% CW, SSB was about 20. And FT8 was about 55%. The number of uniques are pretty high. Normally on expeditions, we average about 18 to 20% in terms of uniques. So coming in with, almost a 30% is pretty high. And 6 continents and 102 DXCCs worked. So these are the statistics per band. As you can see, 10 meters and 15 stellar. The morning pileups into North America were tremendous. I think we all realized that we were not on 12 as much. And I think had we been up to full strength, we probably would have averaged about 5,000 on that as well. But we did really, really well. The one thing I wanted to point out is we did 334 contacts on 60 meters, first ever. The one story about the 160 that I'd like to share with all of you is that I have some friends in the UK. And prior to our activation of Palau, there had only ever been 2 recorded QSOs on 160 with any UK amateur. And by the time we were done, we were over, I think it was about 25 contacts with UK amateurs on 160. So it was really, anytime I saw a UK station pop up, I made sure that we worked them and they got into the log. The other note of interest is we didn't include the video, but on Justin and Jack did some satellite activations, and hence the 12 contacts on 2 meters. And we had brought, Justin had brought a 6-meter antenna as well, and we made 37 Qs with around the world. I think it was primarily to the Japanese, but that was a lot of fun. And then Robin, do you want to talk about the statistics? I think we killed it with CW, right?
Well, we did. I got an email from Club Log the other day that showed that worldwide contacts for CW and SSB are less than 10% by their statistics, and which means about 75% of worldwide contacts are from FT8. And if people want to complain about we didn't do enough CW and SSB, I think you now understand why we did as much FT8 as we did. However, 25.5% of our contacts were CW and 19.5% were SSB. So we exceeded the worldwide averages by double.
Yeah, very good. But other than that, it was, again, a lot of fun. My only point to a lot of you is that at least from Palau and what I saw with the Papua New Guinea, the P25 or P29 operation that was going on about the same time we were there, I think they ended up with only 300. They were there 18 days in Papua, and they only made 300 contacts on 160, all of which was FT8. But they had the same over-the-horizon radar problems that we did. Pretty much in that location in the world, 60 meters on down, completely S9 plus noise levels. And I just really wanted to thank our all of you individual contributors, individuals who have contributed to our project. A big thank you to Step IR for loaning us the big IRs. Arlen Communications with the Radio Sport headsets. Honestly, none of you, when you were working us, heard that generator that was, 4 or 5 feet behind us. Incredible headsets for noise canceling. And then I can't say enough of DX Engineering, basically supporting us all the way. I think they provided almost 2,500 feet of coax, high quality LMR 400. Because we were going to have such long runs at the Caroline resorts to our Yagis. So a big round of applause to all of these companies. And if you can support them, please do. If you've got any questions, these are email contacts.